What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Week 7's edition of the Awesemo.com on the Contrary Show. I'm Dave Loughran, and joining me always, as he does every week, Alex Baker, and a very special guest today, someone that you may have seen at the top of the leaderboards, particularly 3 times in 3 different Millie Maker contests, runner-up in 2 other Millie Maker contests, all of this within the span of the last 10 months. Don't ask me how it's possible. This shit is for real. He actually did this. Gio Demars, you might know him as RBX88. He's joining us today to take care of business with this Week 7 slate. Gio, thanks a lot for joining us, man. And you're not reclusive, right? You know, you do some shows and stuff, but there are many people that today are seeing you for the first time. They've seen you at the top of the Millie Maker. They've seen you win a lot of money. They know that name, but now they finally get to put a name to the face.
Yep. It's always the fun part.
Yeah, so we're glad to have you with us. We'll get into all of it. Alex, Week 7, I mentioned to you before the show, and we've talked about it throughout the week on a lot of our strategy shows, that it certainly feels like one of these weeks. You told me you were surprised to see when you ran the ownership how flat it really is, even for guys like Gio Bernard. I think that might be a pretty big that's going to be something to really hold on to throughout the week, a pretty big theme when making lineups.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was expecting, there's all these people talking about Kamara, Gio Bernard, and a lot of other guys, Kyler Murray. And there's like so many good plays this week that it's almost like none of them are not necessarily going to be like super chalky. That'll make it really interesting. Of course, I'm still trying to chase my first $1 million takedown, so I'm hoping that Gio here can give us all some tips about what we should do to find that secret sauce.
Man doesn't have a Twitter account, but he does have an Instagram account. If you want to hit him up, you can do so at GD_MERS88. GDMERS or _MERS88. Follow Alex on Twitter at Awesemo DFS. Follow myself at Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D, and of course Awesemo at Awesemo_com. So Gio, before we actually jump into everything here, just a little backstory on you. So you've won 3 Millie Makers since December 2019. It's insane.
Yeah.
You even told us before we got started that you had 2 runner-ups, 2 second-place finishes in them, and only one of them was a high-stakes finish. The biggest question, and it's not an easy one, so no one expects a perfect answer, but how did it happen? Like, do you even still know how something like that could happen over the course of 10 months?
Well, it's kind of funny. A friend of mine, when I won the first one, he's like, all right, you're not due for a while.
Which is true.
So it was really funny because, and then I wound up, I don't know the dates, but I wound up getting 2 seconds, and I'm like, this is unreal. And then he's like, oh, you're definitely not due. And then I win the golf tournament, and I'm like, this is just unreal. I don't know. I mean, I'm just running insanely hot. And then the last one, most recent one, I was the high roller that I played, and I won that, and I'm like, this is unreal, and this is just like unheard of what I've done the last 10 months. Like people, play the $1 million maker to try to win it, and they haven't won it in like 5 years, and I won it 3 times in 10 months. So.
How long have you been playing DFS before the first win?
Before the first win, I would say like 3 years, probably 3 to 4 years. I caught on pretty quick. I was terrible, when I first started, and then I signed up on Awesemo, and I changed it around a little bit.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it. That Awesemo plug right now was not requested from either of us. That's completely unsolicited. But no, we're glad to have you here with us, man. And
happy to be here.
I heard that Alex told me you did something really cool with some of this money that you'd won from all the Millie Makers.
Yeah. So actually the tournament that I won, the most recent one, was on my dad's birthday, and we were out to dinner, and I'm like, hey, he was being quiet. I'm like watching on my phone. I'm like, yeah, I think I'm gonna win. I'll let you know in like a little while. And I wound up winning on his birthday, and we were all excited. Jumped up down the car and stuff. So so the following Sunday, I wind up getting his dream car for him the next Sunday. I found that I got it from Texas. I got it here in a few days. And
what kind of car?
It's a 1957 Ford Ranchero. It's a really like rare car. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. It's super cool looking. So yeah, I did that. I donated some to a few charities too. I helped out with like a rescue, like animal rescue. So yeah, I've been giving back a little. I feel that it's good to give back, and it makes people happy too, and it feels good.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Sometimes I think I just have bad karma as a bad person, and it reflects on pretty much everything.
Stop donating.
But I love the animal shelter idea too, man. Sometimes I feel like I like animals more than I like humans. Alex, so one piece of housekeeping duty here. We've actually seen another COVID-19 related schedule adjustment. This time, not so bad. The Tampa Bay Las Vegas game was moved from Sunday Night Football to the 4:00 Eastern hour. The reason for that being that they wanted to make sure they could provide the fans with a Sunday Night Football game in the event that that game got 86th from the schedule. Seattle, Arizona moved to 8:00, but they're keeping it on the main slate. So we went from 11 games ending at the 4 p.m. hour lock to 12 games now with an 8 p.m. game mixed in as well.
Yeah, that should be really interesting because Seattle, Arizona, I think it's pretty evidently one of the best DFS games of the week. Seattle's given up some huge performances so far this year, and Arizona, I mean, you got an absolute star receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. He hasn't really shined for the past couple weeks, but the first one, like, it just showed that potential of getting like 15 catches or something crazy. So I think that'll be really fun. And I mean, there's a lot of other great games on the slate too.
Yeah, and a bunch of guys that are currently questionable to play. We'll talk about all of that. Let's dive right into it, Gio. We'll kick it off with you here. Seattle and Arizona went from 4 to 8, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
It's going to be a really popular game, though. You look at our Awesemo Top Stack tool, quarterback ownership here is through the roof. Arizona number 1 and Seattle number 3. So it goes to suggest that you're going to see a lot of stacking in this game, whether Hopkins plays or not. How are you approaching this one? Now, this isn't on the Contrary show, right? So we like to take different approaches, and a 3-time Millie Maker winner has certainly taken contrarian approaches to get where he's been over the last year. With this being such a popular game, how do you approach it for Week 7?
Well, the fact that a lot of the players, they're really expensive. So, like, playing Wilson, if you want to double stack with Wilson to, like, Lockett and Metcalf, and then, like, you're running it back with, if Hopkins does play, you're running with Hopkins. I mean, you're going to have like 4,000 for like each player left over on average to spend. So it's really like an unbalanced lineup. If you do stack this game, you can always just, I mean, I do like the other, like playing Murray just to like maybe one receiver or something, because he can get, a lot of rushing too. And you honestly can maybe just play him solo too. But maybe we can just go. They have Kirk and who's the other guy?
Christian Kirk. You're talking about Andy Isabella?
Yeah, Andy Isabella. That's it. So you can, like, if Hopkins is out, you can just stack him with this one and run it back with one, just so you can get kind of leverage, and you can kind of balance out your lineup by taking other like good value plays.
Yeah, and Alex, again, you might not be a Millie Maker winner. All right, we get that, but you've become the number 1 ranked player in the world with your ability to see what everyone else isn't seeing. And I think it was Rich Rebar last week. The 3 of us were talking about how difficult it is to train yourself to be able to make plays that may not seem optimal, right? But in football, so many things can happen that aren't really projecting on paper. And now you've got almost all of these games with a 50-plus point total. Does that make it easier for you to get away from a game like this, or be different with a game like this, knowing that there's such a variety of good games outside of Seattle, Arizona, with monster totals and a lot of potential scoring?
Yeah, definitely. I think Gio made a great point about how all these guys in the game are really good players, but they're really expensive. So you can't really easily game stack this one. And that makes it really interesting strategically because even if it's the best game, maybe it's not going to show up in the winning lineups for a full game stack. So I think Kyler Murray is projected to be one of the top owned QBs. I think he is the top owned projected QB this week because you get a little bit of a discount from some of the other star guys. But the thing about Kyler Murray that makes him really hard to play in a really large field tournament is everyone's going to pair him with the same guys because they don't have any tight ends that are any good. I mean, Dan Arnold, he's not really putting up any fantasy numbers to speak of at tight end. And then Fitzgerald, not a very exciting option. So then you got Kirk, and Kirk had a huge game last week. And I think maybe people are going to chase that. So, but then again, Hopkins is such a good player. He's like the natural stack for Kyler Murray. So I'm just kind of trying to figure out what's my angle here. And I think Kyler to Hopkins will be really high owned. Kyler to Kirk will be really high owned. And then there's not really any other option. So I think I might fade this one.
Yeah, it's so tough too because Kirk last week, Alex, had this monster game against a completed and horrible Dallas Cowboys team. But he was targeted only 3 times on the day. He had 1 touchdown for, I think it was like a 6-yard shovel pass type play, and then another 80-yard bomb. Aside from that, though, he was very underwhelming from a usage standpoint. So I think we have to take all of those things into consideration for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's a great point about the targets, where maybe he's just going to be a boom bust player in Kirk, and you don't want to play that guy when he's really high owned. And I'm just thinking, people have that big performance on the mind. So maybe you go rushing in this game, although Drake also put up a big score. The one guy that maybe stands out as maybe someone that people will be hesitant to go to is Chris Carson. If Seattle dominates this game, he could put up a big fantasy performance. The only thing is that Russell Wilson, he's like the only quarterback in the league that the team really scores more touchdowns passing than rushing, like relative to how much they do of each. So Carson's touchdown equity isn't very exciting, but I think he could be a contrarian play.
All right. So, Gio, if you look to another game here with a 55-point total, Lions at Falcons, it's another one where if this blows up and you see 80 total points, I don't think it shocks anybody. But with Matthew Stafford this season, you're talking about someone who has really attempted very few passes compared to what we anticipated. He was on pace for almost 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns last year, and now he's attempted 31 passes in 3 straight games. And one of these games is playing with a from behind against New Orleans. Let's talk about the Lions a little bit. What are you doing with here, and what should also be a really popular game?
Yeah, I mean, Stafford, I feel that, like, every time I see him and he's in a good matchup, I feel like he just, like, never gets there. But obviously it's the Falcons. I don't know if it's just Kirk Cousins last week that he's just terrible, or the Falcons were fired up that they got the new coach. So I could see them playing good defense versus him, and it's gonna be what's the projections right now on the ownership for Stafford?
So right now, Stafford's ownership is coming in as the 6th highest, around 6%, which is the ownership is really flat outside of a couple of spots this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that when I was looking at it this morning. Yeah, he could be a good play. I mean, it's a great, he's easy to stack, and they're super easy run backs. Kenny Galladay obviously can break the slate at any point. So pairing him with, I guess Marvin Jones and TJ Hawkinson, I'm not sure about him. He was all hyped up, and he hasn't really shown too much. And then you have easy run backs with Atlanta. You got Ridley, Gurley. You have and Julio Jones. I think Julio Jones obviously had a really good game last week. And I don't know his price. I forget his price, but when he gets hot though, he can stay hot. And I feel that when on the Falcons, them being so expensive, you can't really full game stack it obviously because it's just really. I think it's just hard for them to get there at that price.
Yeah, Alex, the flat ownership to me is something that really stands out on a week like this. You've got Alvin Kamara and Kareem Hunt with the Awesemo ownership projections coming in north of 20%. But that's really it. There's nobody else projecting for more than 20% ownership last week. I think in the $500,000 slant for week 6, you had 8 or 9 that were 20+% owned. One of them was Miami defense, but still. And then there were a lot right beneath that. Does this change the way that you look at games? And I know we talked about it a little bit with Seattle, but when I talk specific games here, whether it be Seattle, Arizona, Detroit, Atlanta, like, are you just far more willing to get different, or do you say, well, there's no real chalk, I can kind of do whatever I want? And how does that apply to a game like this between the Falcons and Lions?
Yeah, that's a great question, because if no one is really getting a ton of ownership, it could mean two things. One, just like there's so many good plays that it's hard to just pick one that stands above the rest. Or it could be, like certain players maybe on hot streaks when people are trying to chase them. So it's all about trying to figure out the two. And this game has a really interesting situation with Deandre Swift, because Deandre Swift, he didn't get a huge workload last week, but he had a huge game. He won people a ton of money at low ownership, and he was a first-round draft pick this year, or second round, I can't remember. But I think like people are gonna like. I kind of see like the sharp people. I'm trying to like think they're like, well, he didn't get the workload, and therefore, we expect more of the same this week, and he just kind of was the outlier. But then again, maybe the Lions coaching staff, that they like see this as his breakout, and now he's going to take the lead over Adrian Peterson. I don't have a very strong lean of which one of those is true. I mean, there probably some elements of both. The Lions running backs have been really hard to read all year, and that just makes it that much harder. So I'd be really interested in what you guys think of Deandre Swift.
Yeah, Gio, he's coming in at sub 6% ownership, so it's not as of now that people are really chasing last week's performance, and I think there's a variety of reasons for that. But does that open up an opportunity to go here and say, hey, I'm going to bet on him begin to take over these backfield duties ahead of Adrian Peterson, who he's been far more efficient than this season?
Right. I like what Alex said, like how that everything is kind of flat and there's a lot of good plays. So I don't think people will be really focusing on him too much, and kind of like, I feel like some weeks some people forget about a guy. Like the one week where Brandon Cooks, he was like 33%, and then the next week he was like 6%, and it was still a good matchup, and they just completely forgot. So I guess that can be another one of those situations here. If he's, and Swift does, it is a pass catcher, I do believe, and so he could, get a lot of targets, and he could take over like the goal line work from Adrian Peterson too. You just don't know how much Peterson is going to cut into Swift. So you could go over the field on this, and it's probably a good spot for Swift. He definitely is a sneaky play, I believe. So,
what are your thoughts on Gurley, Gio, on the other side, where he hasn't been particularly efficient, but his workload has been pretty huge? And it wouldn't be shocking to see that everyone ends up targeting the passing game here with the Jones, the Ridleys, the Galladays, even Marvin Jones Jr., who the chat is discussing and who has burned many of us this year. But Todd Gurley coming into this one with a pretty solid couple of games under his belt. Not last week, but the week before that, 28 DraftKings points, 19 prior to that, $6,000. Also coming in very similar ownership to Deandre Swift.
Yeah, so Gurley, when he was on the Rams and he was like red hot, you could play him every week and you can just get 20 fantasy points every time. Now, ever since he got injured, I feel that he's a little gun shy. He doesn't have like that pop that he did, and he's like not consistent. He hasn't been too consistent after that injury. So he kind of like scares me a little bit, but he could get there. It depends. How he's. I believe like how he's actually feeling. Like if he just wants to go crazy and just go for it, But I feel like these guys, when they get these injuries, they get kind of gun shy, and they do pop here and there, but they're just like so inconsistent for me. need to really play. I mean, you could play Gurley by himself, but I wouldn't pair him with Ryan. But I would take maybe a small shot on Gurley, but I just really not feeling him too much.
What about you, Alex? The only thing that keeps me coming back to at least entertaining the idea is that the Detroit Lions have been slaughtered in the run game this year. And had that not been the case, probably wouldn't even be a spot that I'm super interested in based on nobody really garnering a ton of ownership outside of a few players. What are you doing with Gurley?
I think Gurley is really interesting this week as a contrarian flyer because last week Julio Jones just went crazy. So everyone's going to be bullish on Atlanta's passing offense. It's a good spot for Atlanta. They have a team total of 28.5, which is really good for a team that, they struggle on the defensive end a lot. So the kind of improbable thing that could happen this game is Atlanta just kind of runs the ball a lot more than you expect. And I do find that rushing fantasy points are more valuable than receiving fantasy points for running backs because of the touchdown equity. So, I mean, if you get a game where, Todd Gurley I've projected for half a touchdown on the ground. If he gets 2, it's somewhat improbable, but not crazy by any means. Then he's going to be absolutely essential. And I think that given the price of $6K on DraftKings, he's going to be really low owned. He kind of fits into the role of that high-priced contrarian play that could win you a tournament.
Okay. Alex, throughout the rest of this game, are there any pieces that you really like that aren't being discussed?
The one thing I had to do a double take on this. I've been working really hard to figure out exactly how to determine how much is the team going to rush versus pass because that's so important on a week-to-week basis. The Lions under Matt Patricia, they become a lot more run heavy. I have them as a base rate of about 46% running the ball. And I had to do a double take because you associate Matt Stafford with being such a high volume passer. But then, you were saying how he's only had 31 attempts in the past couple of games. I don't know.
3 straight.
3. Wow, yeah. I don't know if that's really an anomaly. So it's if they do pass the ball a lot, they have so much upside. But I don't know if we can expect that to happen as often as we'd like.
Hit that thumbs up if you guys are just jumping in the room. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do so. Only 58% of people that actually watch the show are subscribed, watch the channel are subscribed. So if you haven't done that, do so. If you don't like it, simply click unsubscribe. No one's keeping you here. Hit the notification bell as well so you always know when new content's going to drop next. Gio, Packers and the Texans is another one with a huge total. Matter of fact, it's the highest total on the slate at 57. And a couple big pieces of news here are when you talk about Aaron Jones, who has been really one of the best running backs from a fantasy standpoint, especially his ability to get into the end zone over the past couple of seasons. He was a late addition to the injury report, seemed to aggravate something or tweak something in practice, didn't practice yesterday, which means that if he ends up sitting, you could see Jamal Williams at minimum salary, $4,000 on DraftKings, become mega chalk this week. And I would say absolutely the highest owned player on the slate. Maybe I'm wrong, but I can't imagine in this phenomenal spot that if Aaron Jones sits, everyone won't be on Jamal Williams.
Yeah, no, this is a game I'm excited about. So I always like bounce back spots for guys like Rodgers. And I think the Texans are a perfect team to do it against. I think Rodgers was probably felt a little defeated when they got blown out by the Bucs, and now he has a great bounce back spot against the Texans. So the Texans, as secondary, they just seem to be getting torched, and it seems like the last few weeks they just been playing shootouts. And Rodgers, I guess, wouldn't mind playing a shootout. As far as playing Rodgers to who to pair him with, I guess you could, if Aaron Jones does it, you could pair him with Jamal Williams. You can double stack Rodgers and just go Jamal Williams and Adams, and I think Texans are really bad against tight ends too. So I think Tyan, is that his name?
Robert Tonyan, yeah.
Tonyan, yeah. I don't mind just playing Rodgers with Adams and Tonyan. You can go a lot of ways this game, and you can full game stack it too. You can do a lot of different things with this game.
Alex, your thoughts on the highest total game of the week, where Aaron Jones is questionable. Now, feel free to talk about whether you like Aaron Jones or whether you expect him to play, don't expect him to play, what you're doing with that backfield if he's inactive or active in a really great spot on the ground. And then Devonta Adams, coming off of a game that disappointed a lot of people. He was targeted double-digit times, but finished with only 6 for 61s, scoreless yards, and then a bunch of secondary and tertiary guys on that Packers team. And then on the flip side of that, Deshaun Watson has been, from a fantasy standpoint, spectacular over the last few weeks. He's thrown 9 touchdowns over his last 3 games. Brandon Cooks is finally looking like he's back to full speed. Will Fuller also on the outside, another speed guy that can take the top off of any defense. And then David Johnson, who's seen his touch counts remain very high over the past couple of games. This game from top to bottom all around just has so much appeal.
Definitely. I mean, both teams have strong offenses and then are pretty below average on the defensive end in both run and pass defense. I'm kind of excited about Devonta Adams. I mean, Aaron Rodgers was crushing when Devonta Adams was out with like these really scrub receivers. And now Devonta Adams came back and he had a really bad week. So that was like really contrary to what we expected, but I'm hoping that people just hesitate that much more to click him this week in a great matchup. So I think Devonta Adams is going to be one of my top owned plays this week. On the Houston side, I mean, you got to like the shootout potential, as you were saying. And David Johnson, he's the contrarian guy for sure. I mean, I'm going to be chasing this guy I guess chasing is the opposite of the word. Just trying to hit with this guy every single week. The last 4 weeks, he's scored between 12 and 14 fantasy points. We know that in NFL DFS, there's huge variance. That's just like an anomaly that he scored the same amount 4 weeks in a row. But the volume is there. And when you have that kind of volume, it's going to come. Some days you're going to get 20 plus. Other days it's going to be below 10. So I'm willing to take some gambling on David Johnson, given that he hasn't had a breakout game yet.
We had a question, too, on Twitter asking about Chris Carson. Just to backpedal for a moment here, with all of the passing volume, not passing volume, but all of the appeal going to that game through the air, just real quick thoughts on Chris Carson at a price point that's it's a little steep, Alex, but it does feel like he isn't getting a ton of attention either in another very projected high-scoring game until you look at ownership, because this guy asked, why is no one talking about Carson? Carson's projected for the 8th highest ownership on the slate. So it's not just the passing game that's getting owned here.
Okay, yeah. So that is definitely higher ownership than I would expect on Carson. I mean, he's been good this year. Like, he's gotten 23 targets. We've known Carson as this guy that doesn't catch a lot of passes, but he's been targeted on 22% of his routes so far this year, which really shows that he's turned a corner in that respect. And that just increases his bottom line that much. And he also has more than half of the rushing attempts for Seattle on a weekly basis. So I think that he has a ton of upside. The ownership's a little higher than maybe you'd hope, but you are also kind of taking out some of the other high-owned plays if he goes off.
So, Gio, are there any other games right now that stand out to you as just potential smash spots here that nobody is actually talking about, opposed to Chris Carson, who people might not be talking about him, but our ownership suggests that he's actually going to be pretty popular. Any other games that you really like that jump off the page to you?
Well, I've been hearing people talk about him, but I do like Herbert on the Chargers. He has the air yards that guy has, and he's been so consistent over the last 5 games. If you look, he's averaged about 24 fantasy points per game, basically. And this is a great matchup for him. I love he's easy to stack, and I'm not sure if I would even run it back. They can just blow them away. But you could run it back with a few guys on Jacksonville. That's another game that's really appealing to me that I think Herbert can really, really shine in this spot and really go off.
So another one too, Gio, we didn't talk a lot about this this Tampa Bay game throughout the week because, well, we didn't anticipate it being on this slate, right? So now you have to kind of weave this into all of these other games. Fortunately, we can update our projections, our ownership, our top stack tool to make that all very simple for anybody that's over there at Awesemo. But as far as this one goes, it's another projected high-scoring game. It should be relatively competitive, although this Tampa defense, man, the run defense has always been smothering. But their pass defense has looked far more efficient lately. The whole team is swarming the ball. And they're laying 4 points on the road. We moved this game to 4:00. And by the way, they signed Antonio Brown. They love these old guys. They can't fight.
That's so cheap.
What's that?
That's so cheap.
Yeah, it's crazy. So what are you doing with the Bucs? And then Alex, I'm going to ask you about the Raiders on the other side.
With the Bucs, I honestly, the only thing that really sucks about Brady for fantasy is that he doesn't rush the ball, and I feel like in fantasy you really want to try and target guys who rush. And the thing is about the team now that adding Antonio Brown is like, who do you pair him with? Like, there's so many, like, to get the right lineup. I don't know. I'd rather just take like little pieces from this game than actually stack this game. And the defense, obviously, as you said, Dave, is really good, and it should just absolutely smother Jacobs. So I think you can just take a few pieces from this game. I really wouldn't stack it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with this. I will bring ownership into the equation here, Alex, because that's what we're here to talk about. Tampa Bay getting pretty low team stack ownership. Las Vegas coming in around 3% as well. With this game being one we really haven't talked much about, why don't you go ahead and cover it on both sides from Henry Ruggs, who had that monster game in his return against Kansas City, Josh Jacobs, who continues to have some of the most volume in the league, and then on the other side, Godwin and Mike Evans. One of them's been hurt almost every single week, so it's been pretty tough. This team's been banged up. And then Ronald Jones. I know I'm throwing a lot at you here, but I expect you can handle it. Ronald Jones is having a really strong season, and they're making an effort to get him the ball a lot, especially in positive game scripts, as we've seen. For sure,
yeah. This game, well, we got to start off with the COVID stuff because that seems really significant. That 4 offensive linemen for the Vegas Raiders have been ruled out for this game.
No more positive tests was the last report, so there's some silver lining in all of this.
Yeah, so I mean, the fact is they're going to be playing without most of their starting offensive line. The line did shift. The betting line shifted 1.5 points in favor of Tampa after that news, which that's not really that much. I mean, I would have thought maybe the offensive line would have been worth more than 1.5, but that does hurt the Raiders a decent amount. One of the interesting things I found about the Raiders is that they run the ball a ton when they're down. In fact, over the last season and a half, they've run the ball 47% of the time when being in comeback mode. So, that's actually higher than their amount with neutral game script, which was really surprising to me, I guess. So they're definitely a team that, maybe a contrarian play would be running back Josh Jacobs with Tampa. I mean, it doesn't... Maybe that's a little bit too fancy. But I do like Josh Jacobs. We saw versus the Chiefs that he was able to get it done in what you would think would be a negative game script. And then Darren Waller, he's been getting crazy volume this year. Only averaged 8.7 yards per catch, which is pretty bad. But I mean, the volume's pretty insane. So he's been targeted on 25% of his routes, and he's running routes on 87% of plays. So that is elite for any position, especially tight end. So Those would really be the guys I'm looking at. Ronald Jones, I'm going to fade completely because last week LaShawn McCoy came back. He got a lot of the third down work and Jones really didn't run as many routes as we had been seeing in previous games. He went from 52 to 40%. And with Leonard Fournette, I haven't checked his status recently, but that's a factor if he plays. And given that Ronald Jones just had an insane blow-up game, I think I'm going to be fading him now.
Okay. Yeah. By the way, we just got Ian Rappaport tweeting 2 minutes ago. Dawson Knox, tight end for the Bills, tested positive for COVID-19. Tight ends Lee Smith and Tommy Sweeney, he's on the pup, and Nate Becker on the practice squad are considered close contacts. All of them won't play on Sunday, but they are traveling. So another piece of information to pay attention to. One of the biggest pieces of news throughout the week, particularly late in the week, was Joe Mixon being sidelined, being ruled out yesterday, Gio. And, well, there's another Gio that's going to be getting a lot of attention this week. Gio Bernard, in his opportunities to fill in as a starter in the past, really hasn't been bad, right? I think he's averaged around 17 touches and 88 yards, I believe. Not terrible numbers. You can imagine that his ownership will be up there, especially if Aaron Jones plays and Jamal Williams isn't in the equation. Going up against Cleveland, the Cincinnati Bengals had that backdoor cover last time, Joe Burrows with a late touchdown, but they were pretty much out of it for its entirety. The Browns coming off a brutal loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. What are you doing with Gio with Mixon out?
He's obviously a good play. It just really depends. If I guess Aaron Jones is out or not. I feel that Cleveland's run defense is not too bad. Is Bernard the min price on DraftKings?
Joe Bernard on DraftKings is priced at $4,500, so he's $500 above the minimum. DraftKings, of course, this season elevated running back minimum salary and wide receiver minimum salary from $3,000 to $4,000.
Is Browns home, right?
The Browns are playing on the road since Gio Bernard's playing at home. Yeah.
Okay. The only problem is that if Browns get up, if they're up a lot of points, I don't know if they're gonna. It kind of it's like a reverse the game script on Bernard. But it seems like I guess the spreads would be pretty small. I honestly I really don't really. I just don't like the matchup for Bernard. Obviously, he's a good play, and if it saves you some salary, if you need to be. But I'm not really too fond on Bernard this week.
Alex, what about you? Knowing that we've seen a lot of this, where chalk Boston Scott ended up beating a lot of people up. Alexander Madison was chalk in a fill-in spot for Dalvin Cook last week, and he was expensive. DraftKings priced him up a lot, preemptively priced him up a lot after that Dalvin Cook injury, but he was real cheap on FanDuel, ended up being pretty bad. We've seen this happen on a number of occasions where backups come in and they become chalk because, well, it's really the most predictable position. Gio Bernard does have the pass-catching upside, though, which I think appeals to a lot of people in this spot against the Cleveland Browns. Where do you go with him?
Yeah, the Bengals are intriguing because they have Joe Mixon, who they really, think is a really great running back, and then they just run at a really low rate, even in neutral game script. So, they've been playing from behind a ton this year, and I've tried to factor that in too. So I expect them to run even less with Gio Bernard, given that he's more of a threat running routes and not that great as just a power running back. And I think, it's all about the price, $4,500. We've been talking all afternoon about all these high-priced guys that we want to roster. He's going to be the guy that makes that possible this week. If you want to punt running back, punting wide receiver every week is somewhat viable. We've seen that be kind of the winning strategy recently. But as a punt running back, Gio Bernard is pretty much as solid as you're going to get.
Let me stick with you for 1 second, Alex, and continue on with the Gio Bernard and the cheaper running back talk. So there's a lot of discussion, of course, about Gio in chat, as there should be. There's no doubt about that. Another guy I want to ask you about is in this one of the first wave of games, Latavius Murray. We've seen him, and this might be surprising to some people because all you really hear about is Alvin Kamara. But you've got no Michael Thomas. He's ruled out. And then, Gio, I want to go to you, ask you a lot about this game here because there's a lot of inactives. Emmanuel Sanders is sidelined here. And the New Orleans Saints are actually pretty heavy favorites against what I would consider an upstart Panthers team, but still 7-point dogs in New Orleans. Latavius Murray, however, has seen 10 touches, 15 touches, 13 touches over his last 3 games. He had 15 touches in week 1 in that blowout win against the Bucs. Could this be a spot, especially with Breeze entering the twilight of his career, down your number 1 and number 2 receivers, where you just see them do everything they can to pound the rock, and Latavius Murray actually ends up becoming a solid value option to get away from some of the popular cheap backs?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's crazy at all. Latavius Murray, if the Saints run the ball a lot, he's going to get a large portion of that. Where Kamara, I feel like his workload is going to be a little bit more consistent from week to week because they just don't want to play Kamara for too many touches every week. But that being said, I think I do prefer Bernard just being locked into the number 1 role, even though it's a worse offense. I prefer going to Kamara by a lot because, I mean, we do have Emmanuel Sanders and Michael Thomas out. So far this year, Kamara has been targeted at an insane rate when he's running routes. At 32% of the time, he's run routes on drop back. In the last 3 weeks, he's run routes on Breeze dropbacks at 80%, 63%, and 83%. That's way higher than almost all running backs. So I'm just seeing the pass volume being so big, and he's pretty good running the ball too, that Kamara is definitely probably my top play of the week.
Okay. What about you, Gio? No Michael Thomas, again, just to repeat this, no Emmanuel Sanders. That's going to leave the New Orleans Saints pretty hamstrung at the position. You're talking about Traquan Smith, who's actually been pretty decent this year. And then it gets down to Marquez Callaway, and Deonte Harris. And, of course, Jared Cook.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Alex. When Michael Thomas and Sanders are out, Kamara's workload is absolutely insane. Last time Michael Thomas was out, I think 2 weeks ago, I actually had him in my winning lineup. He hit his floor game. I think it was like 20. Literally his floor. And I think Murray stole 2 touchdowns from him. So if those went to Kamara, he gets 40 points. So I really I think Kamara's one of the top plays, and the Saints are going to be using both those running backs in the game too. So I do, David, I like what you said about Murray. I do think Murray can kind of, Murray can. I think they both can get the 100-yard bonus too. It's very possible because Carolina's run defense is one of the worst. So they might just use them to the whole game. And so I really like this Kamara this week.
Okay. Do you like any of these pass catchers for the Saints? I know it's ugly. It's slim pickings for sure. But if they are forced to throw the ball, it's got to go somewhere down their number 1 and number 2.
Yeah. No, they get Traquan Smith and Jared Cook. It depends. I don't know how many targets they got when last time when Michael Thomas was out. Obviously, they're going to get some targets. But it seems like from the Saints game plan is that they love to run the ball when those guys were out. So yeah, I guess Traquan Smith. I'm not really too keen on him. I guess Jared Cook is a good tight end option this week. I guess tight end option is kind of not that great this week.
Alex, do you think we'll see a lot of formations where you've got Latavius Murray in the backfield and Alvin Kamara lined up as a receiver in the slot, maybe even outside?
That is a great question. So what I would do to try to figure that out, I'd probably head to PFF, look at the snap counts. It is somewhat unusual for running backs to get more work because another position player is out. But if we look back to this game in week 5, Kamara and Murray played a combined 79 snaps out of 76. Week 4, we got 66 or 76 out of 70. So there is a handful of plays every game where they're on the field together. It looks like you can expect maybe 10 plays or potentially a little bit more, given that another player is out now.
Yeah, right. And that's what I'm wondering. Because Sanders joins Thomas on the sidelines, could that potentially make a difference?
I think it could, yeah. I am kind of intrigued by the guys replacing Sanders and Michael Thomas. The guy I'm really keying in on is Deonte Harris. He was out week 5, but he's back now. He's been targeted 11 times this season, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's been 21% of his routes. Whereas Traquan Smith, he's only been targeted 12% of his routes, and Marquez Callaway 14%. So Deonte Harris projects as maybe a guy that, with increased snaps, could see a much bigger role in the offense than Traquan Smith and Marquez Callaway, and he's the bare minimum at 3K. So I think Deonte Harris is worth taking some shots on for sure.
Awesome. We've got an awesome promo going on, by the way, getting in that spirit, Halloween spirit. Alex, I had a guy down the street from me, or a family down the street from me. They put up Halloween decorations in August. And I just thought it's out of control, right? And I know with quarantine, you're trying to, maybe get the kids feeling a little bit better and stuff, but they took them down a couple days later. So someone must have said something. Anyway, if you use the promo code PUMPKIN at checkout, you know how to spell it, PUMPKIN, at checkout, you can get an Awesemo Plus weekly NFL Plus Platinum. So all of our NFL stuff, everything for NFL, for $10.31. You get it. October 31st, $10.31. That's nearly $20 off the original price for the full Awesemo Plus Platinum weekly pass. You can test everything out. Very low risk too, right? Maybe you keep that wallet tight to your ass cheek, and you don't want to put money out there unless you feel comfortable with something. You say, oh, you know what? Okay, a whole month, annual. Well, for a week, $10.31. You get a very good idea of what you're getting here. Everything from our ownership projections, our player projections, the top stack tool, all of our premium articles, the lineup builder. You can grab the Fantasy Cruncher add-on as well. And all of our showdown content as included. If you want to do just showdown content and some other main slate and NFL stuff, you could get $3.95 a week. All of our showdown content is included in the Express package now. So we got something for everyone at awesemo.com/join. Check it out. Use that promo code PUMPKIN at checkout. It's $10.31 for a weekly Awesemo Plus Platinum NFL Pass. All right, Gio, let's turn the corner here before we get to our fades and pivots for week 7 and our top bet or our top prop bet for week 7 as well. Trying to bounce back from after last week, Alex. I think we've got a good one here. We'll see. Dallas and Washington, though, Gio. This is just a battle of the bad. So was Thursday Night Football between the Giants and the Eagles. Somebody like Antonio Gibson, we've all wanted him to do really well, and we've all been waiting and waiting and waiting for it to happen. Could this finally be the week, or have you jumped off of that?
It seems like so I haven't really been on him like all year, and I feel that when I'm on someone, I like, as Alex said before, with David Johnson, he's just going to keep chasing him. So I'm probably not going to have anything to do with Gibson since I haven't really been on him. So I don't think I'll be going there this week.
Okay. Alex, Antonio, I have to ask this question, right? Antonio Gibson, you actually have him projected for pretty decent numbers this week against the Dallas team that's coughed up an excessive amount of rushing yards. Even made Kenyon Drake look like a stellar running back last Sunday or last Monday. What are you doing here?
I like the Antonio Gibson call. I think that the volume has been solid. So he, in the last week, it looks like he lost a lot of work to Peyton Barber and McKissick. only rushing 40% of the attempts. But you just have to go back 1 week for him to get 92% of attempts. So over the season, he's gotten 53% of the rushing attempts. That's solid, but not amazing. He's been targeted on 24% of routes. So I think the workload is very solid. The price point is really the appeal here because he's 5K on DraftKings. So I think when you go up against Dallas, that's just been completely abysmal. And Washington, I think at one point they were a favorite in the betting markets, and now it looks like they're a tiny dog. But regardless, Antonio Gibson looks like a solid play.
Every week, Dallas somehow the line closes with them being favored, and they let everyone down. Oddshopper.awesemo.com, by the way. It's awesome. Or just go to awesemo.com, click on the Odd Shopper at the top header. You can see all of the betting records against the spread straight up, the totals straight up as road favorites. You can straight up, you can see them as road favorites. Everything, like all of the splits, all the stats you're looking for. Not only that, though, but you get all the point totals, the spreads right in front of you, the money line, how much of the public money is coming in on a certain team, on the point spread, on the total, all of the stats, injuries. Like all of this is just on one page, by the way. You can track all of your bets as well. You can plug them in. You can set up notifications for your watch list. And of course, the best part is if you're looking for player props, a specific game or a specific player, just type that name in the search box and his props will pop up for you. That's just scratching the surface. Check it out. It's entirely free. So, there's no risk to doing so. I think you'll like it, though. It's really helpful, not just for sports betting, but for DFS as well. Okay. Gio, the Dallas side of this game is ugly with Andy Dalton at the helm. Now, I've said a bunch that Dalton did not play well, but he certainly didn't benefit from Michael Gallup drops and pass interference calls that weren't called where CeeDee Lamb tripped. A lot of things went wrong, all in all, right? Ezekiel Elliott, though, they want to get him involved as much as humanly possible. Is this finally the week where they can do it and just force feed him and keep the ball out of the air?
I mean, he's just been a total friggin' airhead. So, he's like fumbling the ball. He just seems like since he got that contract, I feel like he's just like, whatever. I don't really care no more. He is in a good matchup. The Redskins defense, I don't think they're too that terrible. But you could take a shot on Zeke this week. He could. He's just been fumbling the ball a lot lately, so I'm really not too sure about Ezekiel Elliott this week.
So what are your favorite spots for this week? Somebody put in chat. Tell us who you guys like, not who you don't like. Well, to be fair, a lot of these guys we're talking about that we don't like are going to be super popular plays, and you kind of have to navigate the waters there a little bit. What are some spots you really do like?
I do like like I said, my favorite games are like the Chargers, playing the Green Bay, and I really don't like much else besides those two. You obviously have the Falcons and Detroit. I'll probably have little shares of that game, but for the most part, I'm just going to have a ton of Rodgers. And as Alex said, Devonta Adams is probably one of my favorite plays this week.
Alex, I've got to ask you about this game before we get to our fades and pivots, because it's one that stands out to me, has me scratching my head, but also feels like it could be a really big smash spot. The Titans and the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a 50.5 total. It came down from 52.5. It's still north of 50. Steelers are getting a 1.5 on the road. The Titans have been spectacular this year. I'll take the L there. I really thought they'd be like a 500 team, but as Ben Rossa mentioned earlier in the week, Mike Vrabel's very good. But the Titans have been involved in so many high-scoring games that it feels like every time they're anywhere on the field, it could shoot out last week, 42-36, 42-16, 31-30, 33-30. It's their last four games. And Pittsburgh has a stable of weapons that can produce and create yards and fantasy points. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Titans and Steelers, a game that's vastly going overlooked.
Man, I'm glad you didn't ask me about the Buffalo Jets game because I thought that's where you're going.
Because I ask you about the Jets every week.
I'm kind of off the Jets now. Let's not talk about what happened these previous weeks. But Tennessee, Tennessee is one of the most run-heavy teams in the league, and now you put them against a really good run defense in Pittsburgh. So that really makes it hard to figure out where to go, especially given that Tennessee just absolutely smashed in fantasy last week. Maybe it's a good week to just let the ownership come back down before going to him again. In Pittsburgh, I think this Claypool situation is going to be interesting because, I mean, he's been exceptional, but he had like kind of subbed in for Deontay Johnson. Now that Deontay Johnson is back, you got to wonder, is Claypool going to not see 90% of the snaps like he did last week? But he's been so good that I wouldn't be surprised if Deontay Johnson sees that hit to his work. So I'm kind of feeling like Claypool could, like, I don't think he'll be sneaky because he's been on like a pretty good hot streak, but I'm kind of buying into Claypool a little bit. And then Connor, I think, is always kind of like a good contrarian running back that's never going to get a ton of ownership, but has a good workload.
All right. You guys know we can't hit on everything throughout the show, but that's why we've got tomorrow's NFL Marathon kickoff show. Usually it goes from 10 Eastern to 1 Eastern, all the way up until lock. But we've added a show. Josh Engelman, Adam Scher, 9 a.m. Eastern, getting you started bright and early, taking a lineup builder type look, a deep dive into what they're doing with Cruncher and groups. You'll find out tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. Stick with us throughout the entire morning for the NFL Marathon kickoff show. It's going to be great. Gio, as our guest of honor, I'll go to you first. Your favorite fade of the week or your top fade of the week, not necessarily someone you're going to have none of, but that you might get away from. And then your top pivot of the week, potentially a low-owned player, maybe it's Herbert or somebody else that you like that's going overlooked. Gio.
Hello? Yeah, I hear you. Okay. Sorry, I missed everything you said.
Oh, all right. Your favorite pivot of the week and your favorite fade of the week.
My favorite fade of the week, I think like Russell Wilson. I think he's just too expensive, and it just that whole game is too expensive. So I just like fading that game. As for my top pivot, it's kind of all like kind of flat this week, so it's really hard to pivot off anybody. But
Sure.
if I had to pivot off of one of those running backs, I do like Latavius Murray to possibly snake some from Camaro this week.
Beautiful. Alex, what about you?
My fade of the week, I like that Russell Wilson fade. I think that he might be a little too expensive to make a great lineup. My fade is the Washington football team. I mean, they're a chalk defense, and we saw Miami. Miami's defense was 35% owned last week and won people monies. Now, I think people might be not as worried about going to the chalk defense in Washington, but despite the fact they're playing against Dallas with Andy Dalton, he turns it over a little bit, and Dallas's offensive line is a bad matchup versus the Washington defensive line. But the probability that Washington gets a defensive touchdown is still pretty low. So I think I'm willing to just take chances on other guys to fade the high ownership on defense there.
All right. Did you have a pivot you like? Somebody lower owned that's not really talked about this week?
I think so with the pivots, I'm kind of looking at maybe what's a team that people are expecting everyone to pass, and then maybe you play the running back or vice versa. So I think maybe so I see Traquan Smith is getting a good amount of ownership in Camara, but maybe you take Deonte Harris, who I think is kind of a guy that no one's gonna have heard of, and then Jared Cook is also pretty low owned. So maybe you just stack those guys up. Breeze might not be that good a quarterback to stack, but I do think there's pieces in this New Orleans game that you can pivot away from Kamara and Traquan Smith.
All right. And favorite prop of the week or any specific bet? Like I'll give you one. I have Matt Ryan more passing yards than Matthew Stafford. It's really not juiced that much towards Ryan, which surprised me. Guy's averaging 300 plus yards per game this year, 40 plus pass attempts. I can't buy into Stafford airing the ball out 40 plus times until we start to see it happen. And until it does, I'll keep going with someone like Matt Ryan that passes a whole lot more and for a lot more yards and has an arsenal of weapons from Julio Jones to Calvin Ridley to Hayden Hurst. The list goes on. Gio, your bet this week, you said you had one already that you had in mind.
Yeah, I know it seems a little crazy, but the Saints really haven't been blowing out teams, and I feel that like Panthers kind of always just like stick in there and in competitive games, and also Bridgewater's was on the Saints, so I do like the Panthers money line.
Okay, Panthers money line. All right, I thought you were
going to take. When I bet underdogs, I don't take the points usually. I just bet money line.
All right. They have it. Hey, weird things have happened this season. If there's ever a time, it's 2020 for sure. Alex, what do you got? Close us out, man.
So my favorite kind of bet is one where the data might lead you to the wrong conclusion. And I think like the kind of bets I'm talking about are like Lima Cold Perrine when Frank Gore's everyone's thinking Frank Gore is going to be the lead rusher. Maybe you bet the Frank Gore under and hope Michael Perrine gets more of the work. This week, my bet's along similar lines. I'm betting the under for Adrian Peterson rushing yards. On PointsBet, the over-under is 46.5. And if he had the same workload as, in previous weeks, that would be a flip, basically. But we did see last week that Deandre Swift saw 16 rushing attempts. Adrian Peterson saw 15. Kerryon Johnson saw 4. I mean, the Lions rushed 35 times. So, like, both Adrian Peterson and Swift got a ton of rushing attempts. Swift was far more effective. So I'm thinking that maybe they give Swift more of the workload this week than last week. And that would mean the Adrian Peterson under is very likely to hit.
Love it. The NFL lineup builder is free at Awesemo.com today. So is MLB ownership projections and the MMA top fighter tool. All of that completely free. So you can check that out if you want to use the promo code PUMPKIN. Again, a full week of Awesemo Plus Platinum NFL content for just $10.31. It's a monster discount. And you can listen to all of our shows on podcast platforms, wherever they are, anyone that has podcasts. If you don't want to jump on YouTube, go ahead, listen through the podcast platforms. It's as easy as going in iTunes or whatever you need to do, whatever you use. We're on all of them. Thanks, Gio, a lot for joining us, man. If you guys are doing so, go to Instagram, follow the man, GD_MERS88, and look for him at the top of the leaderboards alongside Alex Baker at Awesemo DFS, myself at Laffy_D. We'll see you back here tomorrow. 4 hours of NFL action kicking off at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Brand new show. Be sure to tune in for it. Show those guys some love as we run that all the way up to 1 p.m. lock. We'll see you back here next week on The Contrary.